Let's look at Tuesday's game, Tuesday, December 22nd, the roofclaim.com Boca Raton Bowl. This is one of the more intriguing early bowl games for me. Central Florida playing BYU. BYU is going to travel over to Florida to play the Knights. And let's just kind of look at the teams right now, just general breakdown, sort of the schedule where they've come from and where they're at. Central Florida 6-3, finished fourth in the AAC East, and then BYU as well with that one loss to Coastal Carolina late in the year. BYU willing to go on the road to play anyone just to try to get some extra matchups, to try to improve their strength of schedule and try to make some type of a last-ditch effort to enter the college football playoff conversation. And really that started to pick up steam a little bit after their 51-17 beat down at Boise State. The Broncos were a little bit banged up. And then after that, BYU went and looked for a game, and they traveled cross country. Give them credit to an undefeated Coastal Carolina team out of the Sun Belt, and Coastal Carolina beat them 22-17. BYU coming within a yard of winning that game there at the end. So let's look at, how does Vegas see this game? BYU opening up a 5-point favorite. The total, a lofty 75.5 projected score, would be BYU 40-35. I do expect to see a lot of points in this game. So I think what's important is let's look at Central Florida at first. Let's look at Central Florida first. They lost a game against Memphis 50-49. They lost to Cincinnati 36-33. They lost to Tulsa 34-36. And the game really they had in hand, Tulsa made a run in the second half, really shut them down and took that game. So the problem for Central Florida hasn't been scoring points. They're averaging 44.3 a game, very similar to BYU, 44.5 as well. When you look at opponents, I would definitely say that Central Florida has played the better competition as far as the points they've been able to put up on the board against the teams they've played. Offensively, from a yardage standpoint, teams not that far off. I mean, Central Florida averaging 212 yards on the ground. BYU almost averaging 200 themselves. They're averaging 198 yards per game on the ground. Central Florida passing game, 373 yards. BYU, 324 yards. But when you look at the defenses, that's where the differences come into play here with the statistics. Central Florida averaging 31 points a game. BYU averaging just under 15 points per game, just over 100 yards rushing per game, and almost 200 yards passing per game. Where you look at the Central Florida defense, 190 yards they've allowed per game on the ground, nearly 300 yards passing per game in the air. They're averaging 200, and they're giving up 283 yards per game. But this is where I say, you have to look at the schedule within the schedule. When you look at some of the teams that Central Florida has played, we know that they're defensively challenged. We get that. We understand that. They've played Memphis. They gave up 50. They scored 49. They played Houston, scored 44 there. When they played Cincinnati, undefeated Cincinnati, who is trying to enter some conversation for the college football playoff. I don't think they're going to get there, but they did score 33 points against Cincinnati. And they're in the Bearcats defense. So Central Florida has shown that they can score. Really, the only time Central Florida has shown that they weren't able to kind of score was that second half against the Tulsa game when they blew that game. I think they might have had 26 points or 20-something points at halftime and couldn't really find any offense in the second half. So Central Florida has shown that they can score against any defense they've played this year. BYU was a little bit of an unknown, I feel, until they played Coastal Carolina. I think that their defense looks good. Their offense looks good, but you also have to put in context some of the competition they played. They opened up the year at Navy. And, knowing what we know now about Navy, that win was nowhere near as impressive. They beat Troy pretty good. Troy's not the team that we feel that they've been over the last 2 years in the Sun Belt Conference. Louisiana Tech, they gave them a beatdown. But then after that game, UTSA, a bowl team this year as well, respectable in Conference USA. They only beat them by 7 points there. The game against Houston was a tight one late, and they pulled away 43-26. And then, they took care of Texas State. They took care of Western Kentucky. Boise State was a little beat up. North Alabama, really not an FBS opponent. And then that's when they hit Coastal Carolina. And then they took care of San Diego State to wrap up the year by 2 touchdowns. And so with that being said, I think there's going to be some things for us to look at when I get into picking this game. But for the time being, let's look at the fantasy matchups in this game. And as far as what our projections tell us, how I feel about the projections and how I would rank these players moving forward. So obviously we're going to start over on the Central Florida side. We've got Dillon Gabriel, 30 touchdown passes on the season. He's got 2 rushing touchdowns. Very similar with Zach Wilson, 30 touchdown passes. He's rushed for 8 touchdowns. So you're looking at 2 quarterbacks this year that have accounted for 30 plus touchdowns for their team this year in the shortened 2020 season. On the running back side, Greg McCray, the leading running back for Central Florida, 681 rushing yards, but Otis Anderson not far behind him. He's got over 100 attempts as well for 614 yards. And then you even have Bentavious Thompson. He's only got 70 rushing attempts, 369 yards on the year, but he does have more rushing touchdowns, 5, than Otis Anderson's 4. If you're looking for a running back to get the ball in the end zone for Central Florida, you have to lean more with Greg McCray, who's rushed for 9 touchdowns this year. McCray and Otis Anderson alike have 12 receptions on the season. They've both been utilized out of the backfield evenly. But if you're looking for a running back option for Central Florida, Greg McCray seems to be your best option there, whereas the projections slightly have Otis Anderson a little bit higher, maybe from a receiving standpoint. But I think if you're looking for a running back to find the end zone for Central Florida, you have to put your stock more so in Greg McCray. Now, remember, they're facing a BYU defense that's only allowing 107 yards per game on the ground. So you want to favor in this matchup to lean a little bit more with the Central Florida passing game and quarterback Dillon Gabriel, who we projected to throw for at least 2 touchdown passes and over 300 yards in this game. Now, when you look at receivers for Central Florida, I believe Trey Nixon is playing in this matchup. Nixon was hurt for most of the season, but Marlon Williams, we know, has declared for the NFL draft. He won't be available in this matchup. So Central Florida's top receiver this year will not be available. But, with Central Florida, they've been able to make do with the options at receiver with Marlon Williams, Jalen Robinson this year, 51 catches for nearly 1,000 yards. He only needs 65 yards to hit the 1,000-yard mark this season. He's got 5 touchdowns. They get Trey Nixon back for the bowl game if he plays. You've got Jacob Harris, who's caught 26 passes this year. Ryan O'Keefe has filled in. He's caught 19 passes and 3 touchdowns. Jacob Harris has caught 7 touchdowns. He's caught more touchdowns than Jalen Robinson. So I feel with the time off that Central Florida has had between the bowl game and their last game of the regular season when they played South Florida, I think they're going to be okay without Marlon Williams. I think they're going to be just fine, and there's a lot of depth at the receiver position for Central Florida. I think if Trey Nixon is healthy and Trey Nixon plays, I think you value him as their top receiver, and I think you have to like the big play potential of Jalen Robinson as well as another option for them in the passing game from a fantasy standpoint. Now, let's look at BYU. I already mentioned Zach Wilson's numbers when I was talking about Dillon Gabriel and giving you a side-by-side comparison. He's right now projected for us to throw at least 2 touchdown passes, 2.3 touchdown passes. He's got nearly a touchdown projection rushing as well. So with his projections, we're looking for him to account for 3 touchdowns in this game and go over 30 fantasy points. So that's a healthy fantasy projection that our projection simulator has given us for this game. I think for BYU, the biggest question in there is, are they going to go in with a healthy running game? Are they going to go in with a healthy Tyler Algier? Will he be healthy for this game? I think he missed their last game against San Diego State. Will he be back? He's a big part of that offense, a big part of the running game. They got Lapini Katoa as well behind him, but he's rushed for 423 yards and 5 touchdowns, whereas Algier he's really on the cusp of a 1,000-yard season. He's got 957 rushing yards and has scored 12 touchdowns this season. I think you'd be looking at, if they both play, Katoa used more obviously as the backup and more so as a receiver out of the backfield. He's got 200 yards receiving this year, 3 touchdowns and 19 receptions out of the backfield. So he's going to be there more of their receiving option out of the backfield. But going against that Central Florida defense, I look for a lot of the BYU offensive options to be in play. Will they have Gunnar Romney back? Gunnar Romney was banged up after that Coastal Carolina game. He really does complete the passing game for BYU, but they got Neil Powell, they got Dax Milne, you've got the tight end Isaac Rex that leads the team with 10 touchdown receptions this year. Milne has over 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns himself. Gunnar Romney, more of that big play receiver, 38 receptions and 755 receiving yards, more of a vertical threat for them. He's only got 2 touchdowns. So, Neil Powell and Isaiah Rex, Dax Milne all have more touchdowns than Romney, but Romney really does complete that 4 receiver, the 4 options that when Wilson has those 4 receiver options. And so I think that they don't necessarily need Romney in this matchup, but it does make their passing game a little bit more complete and a little more dangerous as well. So, how do I see this game playing out? I mean, I sort of agree with what Vegas has said. They've got a 75.5 total. That's the number. And I do think we're going to get near that number. I do think this game has potential to be played in the 30s for both teams. I don't know what kind of incentive we have, but I look at BYU as one of those teams that come out. They're going to play hard every game. In Central Florida, always feels like for the last few years that they've kind of have to prove themselves. And then BYU sort of is that name that was being mentioned with a lot of big teams during the season. So I do think that motivation won't be a problem for Central Florida as well. I think they're going to want to beat a team like BYU. I can see this game, both teams being motivated for this game. Played a little bit closer to Central Florida's hometown in Boca Raton, Florida, obviously much closer than BYU, who's going to travel across country and play. Hopefully they get some nice weather in this matchup here. But I don't really see where the defenses for either team are going to slow one another down. If I think that there's potential for a defense to shut one of the offenses down, I would say BYU based on what we see on paper. But let's be honest, when you look at the BYU schedule, this will be, and I know Coastal Carolina might be the best team that they've played. This most likely will be the best offense they will have played, probably by far. I mean, Boise State wasn't healthy when they played them. And yeah, they did play Houston. But Houston, they haven't had a lot of games this year. They've looked inconsistent. I just think this is going to be the best offense BYU will have played. I think Central Florida is going to be able to move the ball on them. I think BYU is obviously going to be able to move the ball on Central Florida. And I think it's going to basically come down to, this could be one of those games where you hear the old saying, whoever's got the ball last wins. Here's my prediction for this game. BYU a 5-point favorite. I'm going to take Central Florida cover. I think this game stays late. And this has been a really good year for Zach Wilson. I've really been impressed with Zach Wilson. To me, he's been one of the more fun quarterbacks to watch, one of the more exciting quarterbacks. He'll throw it at all angles. There's no throw that he doesn't like, and he will take off when he has to. I think Central Florida covers the 5. I'm going to take the Knights to cover the 5 points, but I'm going to say that there's somehow, some way, BYU sneaks this one out at the end and wins this game. So I'm going to take Central Florida in the points. I'm going to take BYU to win it outright. That's the fantasy take on both sides. I think when you're looking at the best options on Central Florida, it's Dylan Gabriel in the passing game, and I lean on the receiver. Obviously, I'm going to go Trey Nixon if he's healthy and playing, and probably Jalen Robinson as my second best option because I like more of the passing game for Central Florida. And I think with BYU, Zach Wilson by far is going to be the best option. If Tyler Algier, and if he's completely healthy going into this matchup, I like him as a top option, but I think my second best option right now just would be Dax Milne. He's been Wilson's top target. I would go Wilson, Milne, Algier, as long as Algier is healthy. And obviously, if you do play in a league or you want and need a tight end because it's mandatory, Isaac Rex is going to be one of the best options for you this bowl season. So that's my breakdown of the roofclaim.com Boca Raton Bowl being played on Tuesday, December 22nd.